welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host, with our guest author Leo Madigan, author of Exquisite Miniature, Nellie Organ, and it's 1903 to 1908, and it's published by Fatima Othal Books. Welcome, Leo, to EWTN's Bookmark.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Good to have you back here. And those people who may have been hopefully watching EWTN for the at least the last 5 years or so may remember that you were here about 4 or 5 years ago talking about a book about Fatima, right? The Fatima Guide.
Fatima Guide, yes.
Right. Now, I hear your accent, and they may remember as well that you don't sound like you grew up in Portugal, did you?
No. I'm a New Zealander. I was born in New Zealand, from a old New Zealand family. But I went to sea at 16 on the British ships. My brother went on the New Zealand ships, I went on the British ships, and so I've lived most of my life in Europe.
Right. Right. You have a connection with Fatima. You actually live in Fatima.
I live in Fatima. I've lived in Portugal for 23 years.
And you've written a couple of books. I know you even got a small Fatima prayer book. And one of the things that struck me and kind of connected to this in my mind was you have another book we're just going to mention, Princesses of the Kingdom, with Jacinta Marto and Nellie Organ. Now, Jacinta, of course, is Fatima. Okay, and I think I've always had a strong devotion to Jacinta and Francisco. Great. I thought it was kind of interesting that because in this particular little book you talk about the parallels between these two little girls. Okay, now did your interest in the Fatima shepherd children, including like Jacinta, have anything to do with your connection to writing a book about somebody who I have to admit I never heard of, who is Nellie Organ, who from the dates appears to only have lived, and from your book, to less than 5 years?
Yes,
right?
4.5 years, yes. No, not really, except they were both little girls, but they did have an awful lot in common. Just little things. I mean, the suffering that both went through, and that they both understood the sacrificial suffering, the religious dimension of it. For that age, just is phenomenal. Phenomenal enough in Jacinta, but Nellie was half her age. But just in little things like Jacinta had, some long medical word, 2 ribs there. And they were full of pus, and the stench apparently was unbearable at times. People couldn't even get near her. And Nellie had exactly the same thing. She had caries.
Right, you talk about there's she has like 3 different kind of...
Nellie had, she had tuberculosis, caries, and a spinal defect, which was terribly painful.
Well, let's talk about it, because, you know, I grew up in the Northeast, in a fairly Irish Catholic area.
The Northeast of what?
Of the United States,
in
the New York area. There's a lot of Irish Catholics there, and certainly a heavy influence, and a lot of, St. Patrick's Day parade is very big in New York City. So a lot of the Irish saints and those kind of things were fairly well known. Now, I had never heard of Nellie Organ. Now, is she someone who's well known and I missed her, or was she more well known in the past than she is today?
Exactly, yes. Where she is well known, she's very well known. But as you say, in the past, she was. The thing was, she was, as you said, the dates there before, she was born in 1903, died in 1908. And it was because of her 2 years later that Pius X brought the age of communions down. Before it was in the when he heard about her, it was in the teens, even in the 20s, the first communion. But he said that Nellie, when he heard about her, that was heaven's confirmation for him for bringing the age of communion.
Well, let me ask you that and help us all along, and you can further explain it to. She's a little girl, and she obviously had these illnesses, and she died very young, and somehow her life had that kind of impact on the Holy Father at the time. Why? What was special about her?
Okay. That's why I wrote the book. We've only got 20 minutes. Could I just
give me some highlights?
Would you mind if I just sort of? I'm not terribly articulate. Just give the first chapter to give a certain background. It's
sure, if you want to read
tiny.
It's
only a couple of pages.
Right.
Stop me if I get terribly boring. I probably won't stop, but I mean, just tell me. The first chapter is called Death in an Orphanage. In the early evening of Sunday, February the 2nd, 1908, a girl child lay dying in her little bed in a convent in Sunday's Well, Cork Island. Throughout the religious houses of the country, monks and nuns were preparing to sing the Nunc Dimittis at Compline, for it was the feast of the presentation of the child Jesus. On that day, in the temple in Jerusalem, a man advanced in years and merit had received the divine child in his arms and exclaimed in a cry of faith, "Lord, now let thy servant depart in peace according to thy word, for my eyes have seen thy salvation." This time Nellie really was dying. This time doubt wasn't an option. She was in her last agony. It was as if a much-loved princess was leaving her court. Each individual, from the oldest nun to the youngest infant, felt that she was losing a part of herself. The dental malady caries had eroded part of her jawbone so that fragments had simply fallen off. In this instance, however, the little girl's heart-rending sufferings and her patient acceptance of them had astounded those who attended her. The girl's name was Nellie Organ. On that day of her death, she was 4 years, 5 months, and 8 days old. Within 2 years, Pope Pius X, 1,000 miles away in Rome, would be citing her influence as the reason and justification for one of the most memorable briefs of his papacy. Who was this infant? What made her so extraordinary that even today, over 100 years later, pilgrims come from foreign lands to visit her grave? She's been given no official recognition. She is an embarrassment to some clergy. There are no statues to her. The major libraries of Dublin, both Catholic and secular, have almost no record of her. To the worldly, she is of no more consequence than a name on a tombstone. But those who come under her spell can never forget her, because her life, as uneventful as Nazareth, nevertheless encapsulates the mind of God. Her message was the simplicity of Bethlehem. Her method of delivering it was the immolation of Calvary. Alas, prophets, as we have the Lord's word for it, are not accepted in their own countries.
Right. So, you know, you paint a vivid picture. You start off with this very sad story about this little girl dying, and you reference that. But again, I go back to what is it that these people saw in her and experienced in her that, though it's always said that a child dies, okay, that anybody does, but especially a child and somebody so young. But what was it in her life? What is it that they saw in her? Just her suffering? Were there insights?
Not the suffering itself, it's the way she handled the suffering. Even when she first, can I just very briefly, she was born in Waterford. Her father was in the army. She was the fourth of 4 children. She was 2 years she was born in the barracks there, it's still there in Waterford. After 2 years, he was posted to Spike Island, which is in Cork Harbour. Cork is one of the largest harbours in the world, and there's several islands. One has got an old fort on it, a military base there, did then. And he was there. She was there for about 18 months. Then the mother, who was the entire influence. I think if she's ever canonised, the mother should be canonised along with her, sort of thing. She had tuberculosis. She died, and so the 4 children were farmed out to convents and things. I mean, the poor young soldier with 4 kids. I mean, it must be terrible for the poor fellow. You can't sort of imagine how awful it would be.
And that's why she was at that place when she died, ultimately, you were reading about,
yes,
right?
She was sent to the convent, her and her sister Mary, to the Good Shepherd Convent. And they were there for 9 months, well, only really 7 months, because the first 2 months she was so sick she was sent to the Sisters of Mercy Hospital. And they came back, and the only really records we have of her proper are the last 7 months. But from the beginning, it was obvious to the nuns that here was someone very, very different. I mean, still the 3-4-year-old little girl. I mean, she wasn't particularly precocious in any way at all. But like the sisters, there was one particularly called Immaculata, who could sort of see in certain positions she'd be sort of crying but not stamping her foot and screaming and yelling, and my foot hurts, my back hurts, or something like that. They realised after a while that she actually understood the importance and necessity of undergoing the suffering in relation to Christ. When how she understood
She would say that?
Oh, no, she wouldn't say it.
So it wasn't something, it was something they witnessed, it was really a silent witness in a lot of ways?
Yeah, okay, I should have really, there's so many little things here. That's why you write books rather than talk about things.
Because that was even in reading the book, I was trying to pull that out in reading it.
No, like, you know, when young girls of 2, 3, or young children, asking questions, you know, a Gatling gun of questions about everything in the world. Nellie was no different, but all her questions were of Holy God.
I see. Okay.
All her questions. Nothing else seemed to even sort of interest her. It was just Holy God, Holy God, Holy God. And like in the convent, the first time they ever took her into the chapel when the Blessed Sacrament was exposed, she just pointed and said, "That's him. That's Holy God." That's so. You know, if you're a nun,
she had this sense.
She had this sense, and that got through to the others.
Be not learned in effect, but intuitive.
Yes. What? I mean, I can't say whether it's intuitive or learned. I mean, I'm not big enough to say that. how that comes about, one doesn't know. I mean, God doesn't ever seem to directly, I'm going to have that one as being a great saint. It's always through second-hand things and for other people and everything else, it appears to be.
So let's talk about that. And in the back of the book, there's actually on page in the 240s here, there's a bunch of actual images and that, some of which we showed a little bit earlier while you were reading.
Yeah.
These interesting images, page 228, I think, on or so, and because of the time frame, there's limited number of pictures. These were like drawings of her life, right?
Yeah. There was a fellow, an Irishman, who was very keen on old photography, who was in London, and he just went to an auction. There was an auction of old photographic material. I think this was in the 60s, and he went and looking through it, and he knew about Nellie. He knew about Nellie's life. He was Irish himself. And there was a box of old plates, and he just picked them. And he said, couldn't sort of believe it. These are all Nellie. There was 18 of them. These couldn't be anybody else. They must be Nellie Organ.
Right.
The writing on them was in French, but they didn't identify anything. And he bought them. He was the only bidder.
Right. And you were actually growing. You didn't grow up in Ireland. You grew up in New Zealand. And you heard about Nellie Organ from the nuns in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Now, were they Irish nuns?
No, they weren't. They were New Zealanders, every one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
It was Sister Chrysostom, I remember, who mentioned Nellie quite often.
And why? What was it about Nellie Organ that she found powerful? That she would bring her up to you or to your classmates?
Well, anything that had influenced us kids at the time, I think we should.
You should think more about God than football or something, or rugby, or.
Well, I suppose it was in the Christian doctrine class, and they were nuns. That was a convent. It was an orphanage actually, although it wasn't an orphan. It was a very interesting place. There was about 60 boys and about 40 nuns, I think. Sisters of Mercy. It was very interesting. A third of us were Pākehās, of white New Zealanders. A third of us Maoris and Islanders. The other third were Poles. Can you imagine it?
So let me ask you, because again, I understand it sounds dramatic, and all the people there who experienced her. But what was it that transcended her actual existence? Because she dies, and so what carries on? Are there writings of hers? Are there sayings of her?
This is the whole point.
It's just the people who experienced her passed that experience along?
This is the whole point. She was exactly the antithesis of everything we sort of inclined to sort of say. She had nothing of her own. She couldn't read or write, obviously. She was very young. She had there was no great desires in the attic. There was no great plans in the drawer. There was nothing except holy God in her whole psyche.
Let's say this. At the time, as we indicated before, she died in 1908. She had some sort of following, obviously large enough that she became to the attention of the Holy Father at the time.
Yeah.
I would gather in around 1910 or something, based on the time.
But after she died, I'm sorry, there's quite a few little things there. I can't sort of get them all together.
Were there Nellie Organ societies or prayer groups or things?
I doubt it very much.
Or devotion? Because she's not up for sainthood or anything, is she?
When she died, she was buried in the convent had its own cemetery, but that was for the nuns. She was buried in St Joseph's, the public cemetery, which is still there in Cork.
Right, and I think you have a picture of the tombstones. Was she moved at one time?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Yes.
Okay.
After about 18 months, about a year, the cemetery didn't want her there because people were just coming and leaving crutches and all sorts of things. I mean, there were miracles all over the place.
Okay. So people prayed to her and they got miracles, or they came to visit her grave and they had those experiences?
Just word of her got around. I mean, real holiness does that. It just sort of does. I don't know how it does it, but it sort of does. I mean, it's not as if she was preaching anything whatsoever. So the sisters thought they'd take her back and have her buried in the convent, and they dug up the body. Just to see that it wasn't infected, because she died of tuberculosis, it wouldn't be infected. They took it away, and she was totally incorrupt. I mean, just
oh really? Okay.
Like St Bernadette, totally soft to the touch. The body, the medal of the Children of Mary that she had around her neck was brightly polished, as if someone had just done it. The blue ribbon was just like it came from the haberdasher's store. They buried her back again. Then a few months later, they came and actually took her back to the where she is now.
Now, for her, obviously, she has the military background with the father where she grew up. at least got started. The mother died very young, though the mother, I think, was very religious, right?
Oh, yes.
And very much into the rosary, I think.
Yes.
Are those the influences people saw in her later, was from her mother? Or?
Well, I certainly read that into it.
Right.
Very much. I mean, she was a great sort of... I had the feeling that the mother realised she was dying, and that her whole job was to instill into the children, and particularly Nellie,
Right.
That was her job, to
Right.
instill the devotion to Holy God.
Also, you were talking about that, they had to move her grave because of all the people coming and stuff. Were those kind of miraculous events related to her? Were those things that just happened 100 years ago? Are they happening still today?
I can't say much on that. Where people know her, there's tremendous devotion to her. I can't talk on medicals and things. Medicals are not my department.
So if I was a person and if you met me, and let's say I was somebody very devoted to Nellie Organ, I would be devoted to her because of her childlike simplicity.
Yes.
Her central one-on focus
And her
of God
devotion.
and holiness.
And her devotion to the Eucharist, particularly.
Right,
When she thirsted for the Eucharist. She really
Right, and that's
thirsted
where
for
the
Eucharist.
papal connection about Holy Communion you mentioned
Why
comes
does
in, right?
A holy God goes to others. Why am I too young? At that age, a million years before I can.
Right, and she was obviously never going to
And
get there.
and then she was dying. In those days, they used to confirm very often. The bishop said, "If anyone's ever dying, let me know. I'll come and confirm." And they thought that Nellie was dying at one point. They thought she was dying almost every day. And the bishop.
Yeah, that explains it too, because I know that you talk about her being confirmed,
bishop
and I was
himself
thinking she's pretty
said-
young to be confirmed.
Yeah, but I think it wasn't totally uncommon in those days.
Right.
But the bishop himself said later, not at the time, said later that he was saying Mass and he got this sudden impulse that he must go and confirm Nellie Organ. And he'd never even heard of her, except, well, he had, just the Reverend Mother had said the two little girls have just joined the convent, the Organ sisters, that was all. Must go and confirm. And after Mass, he rang up and he said, "I'm coming to confirm." The little girl went and confirmed her. Then some months later, and all the time Nellie is just asking, I mean, when people, she was in bedridden most of the time, when people would go down to Holy Communion, she said, when you receive Holy Communion, come up and kiss me, and then go down and make your thanksgiving. And even when the people came to kiss her, she wouldn't let them talk. She wouldn't talk to them or anything. She had that entire sort of sense of the Eucharistic presence, and always sort of thirsting for the Eucharist. And then there was a priest called Father Berry, I think, a Jesuit, who came to give a retreat to the sisters, and he was very impressed with Nellie and that sort of thing. And he spoke to the bishop about him, and the bishop said to question her. She was really sort of too young, but to question her. And he said to her, "What is the Eucharist?" And she says, "It is Holy God, and I receive him on my tongue, and he goes into my heart and makes me and the sisters and the other girls holy." That's a pretty good answer for a 3-year-old.
Right. Now, you were mentioning that you had recently been here in the States giving a talk about Nellie, right? Now, we all know she's from Ireland. We read a lot in the newspapers about the church going through some tough times in Ireland. Is there still any form of devotion to her in Ireland?
Yes, there is. Those who know about it, it's amazing. Often, because I meet an awful lot of people.
What percentage of Catholics you would say in Ireland who go to Mass know about Nellie Organ? Most people do? Or?
No. 15 maybe. I don't know. I'm not good at that sort of thing.
Right.
The old generation, but do 15% go to Mass now? I mean, Ireland has fallen down.
What was the age bracket of the people who came to see you talk about her life here in the States?
Actually, no, that wasn't in the States. That was in Fatima the other day.
Oh, okay.
I've only just flown over. They were American people.
Okay.
But they didn't. I was asked to do it because the people who led them, the Dudeks, knew about it. But I don't think that the people. I don't think that they're...
So most of the people really didn't know about her?
No.
Okay, so you were actually educating them about her, right?
Telling her about them, yeah.
Right, exactly. And is that why you felt called to write this book?
But a lot of people, Americans, do know. I mean, I'm often getting letters, emails and things, send us this, send us that, or something about
Do you
Nellie.
see that rising? Is that a function of your book? Or?
This has been proved sort of very oddly popular. Getting orders all the time.
Why? What do you think about telling her story that
once you get
appeals
under
to
her,
people?
once you get under her, what's the name? She's so real because there's nothing of herself. It's all.
Well, the book is very basic. I mean, it
Christ.
really is kind of gives you that sense of her life, and I think what's nice about the book too is I think in a sense of what you're doing now, you're not over-interpreting things. You're in a sense trying to say,
I'm so badly interpreting.
no, I mean in the sense that you're kind of laying out, this is what it is, and this is how people reacted, and this is the sense people had, without trying to necessarily like impose your own perspective on it,
okay,
but
good.
really
I hope
give
not, yes.
people an idea of what she was like and how people responded to her at the time.
Okay, good. Just on the Irish question, when she, the anniversary of her birth in 1903, there was a celebration in Dungarvan, which is in County Waterford, where her father came from, and a lot of the family still live. There's a lot of organs around there. In fact, it says they say there were more organs in Dungarvan than there are in the human body. But it's funny or not, but it amused me when I first heard it. And there was a mass in the evening, and the local museum, just to have something, I mean, just a small town, but to even have a museum, but they gave one room just to exhibit Nellie's things, which I was over there for the occasion, which we did. We put the things in there. A fellow who's a great devotee of Nellie, called John Donovan, organised all this. Wonderful fellow.
Right, you kind of dedicated the book to him.
I have,
really,
because
right?
of yes, you noticed that. That's good.
Yeah.
But the museum and the mass, we thought that'd be it. It'd be lovely. And they had the museum here for a week. I think they had to keep it open for about 3 months. The museum. There were buses coming from all over Ireland. Busloads of people. I mean, so it is. No, she is sort of remembered where she is remembered. And the same in the anniversary of her death. There was a mass in the Vincentian Church in Cork. That was crammed full of people, just full of people. It's a very large church.
Right. As I asked you before, I'm just wondering, does she have any particular status inside the church?
Nothing.
I mean, nothing.
Pius X wanted to canonize her. He said, "Give me the miracles, give me the miracles,
really,
and I'll canonize her. I'll beatify her." But she's not even venerable, I don't think. But I think that's sort of taking off now. Can I just do one little thing here at the end? Part of writing this was to sort of say to Ireland, look, you've got an absolute treasure here and you're not taking any notice of it. And, you know, they've got the Eucharistic Congress there in June this year. Wow. Many of Nellie's devotees had hoped that she might have been selected as one of the patrons of the Eucharistic Congress in Dublin in 2012. After all, who could name a child in religious history who is so flawless an example of the Christian message and of the centrality of the Eucharist to that message? A child who was not only a prodigal of faith and theory, but of faith and practice. A child whose grasp of the paradox of redemptive suffering and union with Christ was phenomenal. A child whose identification of and with the real presence was of an order not reached by many of the faithful, though they live for decades. It is no secret that many in Ireland have abandoned the faith in the course of a single generation. It is the prayer of those who have kept their foothold secure that intoxication with the giddying wine of the world will soon pall, and the wanderers will return humbled and renewed, so that the beloved country will once again become a land of saints and scholars, and perhaps a little child will lead them.
Lead them, right. Now, one thing I wanted to mention too, and remember, I believe the EWTN is actually working on a documentary in Ireland about her life, right?
Yeah,
The Paul Macri piece, right? Which I know you allude to in the book. And just before we go, because we're just about out of time, you say that it's a story of a little girl who took the road to Calvary and found herself on Tabor.
Yeah.
Mount Tabor.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, explain that before we go.
Can I? Can anybody? But that's true of anybody. If you follow the actual, if you follow Christ to Calvary, you do finish up with with His glory.
Right. But you can't go to Tabor first. You got to go through the crucifixion first, right? Most people want to go to Tabor and hang out, build some tents like St. Peter did, right? Well, let me just ask you before we go, how long did it actually take you to put this together?
I don't know. I think it was relatively quick. It's not a vast sort of book. It's on Kindle now, I might say too, which
well, great,
rather interesting. I never think of those sort of things. You sit down and you do it. I don't feel that I wrote that book. I feel that Nellie was
wrote itself.
No, Nellie was writing it.
Right.
Using the worst things she could possibly find, just so that it asked for no glory for itself. Not that there's much glory attached anyway.
Well, I think you're being extremely humble. Thank you so much, Leo.
That's very
good luck.
Very uncharacteristic, I assure you.
Good luck with this book, and good luck raising the awareness about Nellie. Okay?
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Leo Madigan. Exquisite Miniature is the title. Nellie Organ, 1903 to 1908, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Check it out and check us out next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark. Thanks for joining us.